My name is Mara Ellison. I'm 26 years old.
I rent a one-bedroom apartment just outside of Denver, the kind with beige walls, thin carpet, and a view of a parking lot instead of mountains. I work at support for a healthcare software company, mostly remote. It's not glamorous, not what I daydreamed about when I was a kid, but it pays the bills, and more importantly, it keeps me at a safe distance from my family.
I used to think we'd made peace. Now I know I was just far enough away not to see the cracks. This whole thing started less than a month ago, mid-March. I was at my parents' house for dinner, something I did every couple of weeks out of habit more than desire. The house looked the same as always. Mom's seasonal wreath on the door, Dad's dented SUV in the driveway, Emma's shoes kicked off in the hall, like she lived in a magazine that didn't have consequences. Emma is 25 and still lives at home. Everyone always says it's just until she figures things out. But the truth is, my little sister has never been asked to figure anything out. She's not spoiled in an obvious reality show way. It's subtler. She doesn't get every little thing she wants, just everything that matters. Rent, car, trips, grace. When I stepped into the dining room, Mom was already in full presentation mode. She had printed brochures spread across the table, actual glossy brochures like it was 1998. A cabin resort in Aspen. Rustic beams, stone fireplaces, string lights hanging over a hot tub on a deck that overlooked a valley of pines. "Look at this one," she said, tapping a photo of a couple on horseback. "And there's hiking, and they have these guided stargazing nights. Can you imagine? No phones, no emails, just us and nature." She said us like I was included.
Dad nodded, spearing a piece of meatloaf. "They've got a package deal for 4, he added. "Cabin sleeps 4, meals included, the works. We got in just before the busy season prices."
Emma was scrolling on her phone, half listening, giving little mm-hms whenever Mom looked at her like a cue.
I sat down, poured myself some water, and listened to them talk about trail maps and horse riding times and whether Emma would need new boots. I chewed slowly, watching the pictures on the brochure blur together.
At some point, almost casually, I said, "That sounds amazing. Could I come?"
3 words. Could I come?
The room shifted. Mom's expression flickered.
For a split second, her face was completely blank. Then she pasted on a sympathetic little smile, the same one she used when she sent me articles about how expensive apartments are these days.
"Oh, honey," she said gently, "we didn't think you'd be interested."
Interested in what?
Spending time with my family? But I didn't say that.
Dad jumped in, too quickly. "Cabin only sleeps 4, he said. "And things are tight this year. Taxes, you know. We just didn't want you to feel pressured to pay your own way. Rent and everything. It's a lot."
He said it like they were doing me a kindness, like excluding me was an act of generosity. I swallowed my bite of food. It felt like it stuck in my throat.
"I can pay for myself," I said, keeping my voice even. "I haven't had a vacation in years."
Mom shook her head quickly. No, we don't want that. Really. Besides, it's already booked, and the beds are set up as 2 rooms. It would be awkward to change it now."
Emma finally glanced up, as if on cue. "Yeah, it's kind of like set," she murmured. Then, as if reading from a script, she added, "Maybe next time, Mara."
There was never a next time, not with them.
I sat there, forcing a smile, feeling something small and stubborn inside me crumple.
"Okay," I said, "sure, no worries." We finished dinner. Mom talked about travel-size shampoos. Dad made a joke about needing a break from civilization. Emma snapped a picture of her food for her story, but didn't tag me.
I washed the dishes while they moved to the living room to watch a movie. I listened to them laugh through the wall and tried not to hear the soundtrack of my own childhood in it. Emma with a new bike, me with hand-me-downs. Emma skipping chores because she's stressed, me being told I was more mature and could handle more. On my drive back to my apartment, the city lights blurred into one long smear. I kept thinking,
maybe it really is about the money. Maybe they're trying to protect me. Maybe I'm overreacting.
I told myself a dozen maybes until I reached my building, and none of them felt right. But I didn't say anything. Not to them, not to anyone. I went back to work the next day, sat through video calls, reset passwords for strangers, and tried to file the whole thing under things that hurt, but not enough to fight about. A week later, on a Wednesday night, I found out just how wrong I was. I was eating leftovers at my desk, half watching some mindless show on Netflix, when I flipped open Facebook on my phone. I don't even know why. Habit, boredom, masochism.
At the top of my feed was a new post from my mother, a photo of a cliff in Colorado, blue sky, mountains, pine trees, and 4 figures standing at the edge of the overlook. My mom, my dad, Emma, and Zach, Emma's boyfriend. He had his arm around Emma's shoulders, her head tilted against him, both of them grinning like an ad for a credit card rewards program. The caption read, "Our family and our dear daughter with her new boyfriend. Family together." My thumb froze over the screen. It wasn't just that they went without me. I knew they'd go. The trip was booked. It wasn't even that they'd had fun. I wanted them to have fun. It was the caption. Our family. Family together. They'd made room. Just not for me. They'd said the cabin only slept 4. They'd said money was tight. They'd said they didn't want me to feel pressured. But there was Zach, a guy Emma had been seeing for, 2 months? 3? The quiet, polite type who said, "Nice to meet you," and shook my hand the first time we met. I liked him. I still kind of did, which somehow made it worse. If they had asked me, "Hey, is it okay if we invite Zach?" I probably would have said yes. They didn't ask. They just replaced me and wrote a caption about how complete the family felt. I didn't comment, didn't like it, didn't send a question mark or a passive-aggressive emoji. I just closed the app, stared at the dark reflection of my own face on the blank TV screen, and let that sentence carve a hole in me. Our family. A week after they came back on a Monday night, there was a knock at my door. Not the buzzer from the lobby, an actual knock. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door and there they were, Mom, Dad, and Emma, all 3 of them crammed in the hallway like a sad version of their vacation photo. Mom's hair was frizzed and unbrushed. Dad looked like he hadn't slept in days. Emma's eyes were ringed with mascara smudges. I didn't say hello, I just waited. Mom started talking immediately, words tumbling over each other. Their SUV had been stolen and later found stripped in a parking lot. Dad had put money into a can't-miss business deal with an old friend, money borrowed from his retirement that turned out to be a scam. Emma had tried to help cover some expenses with her credit card and maxed it out. Everything was falling apart. They needed help. Just for a little while, Mom said. We need a place to crash until things stabilize. Maybe a small loan. You're so good with money, Mara. You're responsible. We're just in a tight spot. I thought about the brochure on the table, the spa photos I never saw because I wasn't there, the caption, Our Family. And I realized something simple and brutal. I was only family when they needed a landing pad. My voice came out quieter than I expected. No. Mom blinked. What? No, I repeated. You can't stay here. I'm not giving you money. Dad frowned. Mara, don't be ridiculous. We just need... I heard what you need, I said. My answer is no. The hallway felt smaller, the air thicker. Emma stared at me like she'd never really seen me before. They looked at me as if I'd thrown them out into a blizzard. For years, I'd been the reliable one, the fixer, the one who said yes. This time, I closed the door. They didn't knock again. For the next 2 days, my phone stayed eerily quiet. No messages, no passive-aggressive texts, no guilt-laced voicemails. Nothing. I told myself they were embarrassed. I told myself maybe this would be their wake-up call. What I didn't know was that the silence wasn't an ending. It was an inhale. And something ugly was about to exhale right back at me. For 2 days after I told them no, my phone stayed as still as a stone. No group texts, no guilt trips, no, we need to talk. Even Emma's Instagram went dark. That, more than anything, felt wrong. My sister treated her story like a heartbeat. Brunch photos, dog selfies, blurry sunsets with song lyrics pasted over them. She posted when she woke up, when she went to bed, when she breathed. Now, nothing. For a little while, I let myself believe the nicest version of the story. Maybe they were embarrassed. Maybe they'd taken my no as a hard but necessary boundary. Maybe this would be our pivot point. They'd stop leaning on me, we'd all cool off. Maybe, in a few weeks, we'd talk like adults. That fantasy lasted until Friday morning. I was halfway through a ticket at work, walking a nurse through reinstalling a driver, when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Unknown. Hey, it's Zach. Can we talk? I stared at his name, floating there like a ghost. I hadn't seen him since before the trip, since before the family together caption, since before he took the spot that was supposed to be mine. I wrote back, me. Yeah, when? Zach, tonight, after work? I can come by. Part of me wanted to say no, to slam that door too. But curiosity won. Me. Okay, 7? Zach, I'll be there. He showed up at 7 on the dot. He looked smaller somehow, not physically, just deflated. He held his keys so tightly his knuckles were pale. "Hey," I said, stepping aside. "Come in." He sat on the edge of my second-hand couch like he was afraid of taking up too much space. I offered him water. He shook his head. "I won't take long," he said. "I just needed to be honest with you about some things. And I didn't want you to hear them from Emma or your parents." I braced myself. For what? I wasn't sure. "I didn't know you weren't invited on the trip," he blurted out. "I swear." I studied his face. He looked genuinely ashamed. "What did you think?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Emma said you were busy, that you had a big project at work and couldn't get away. Your mom said you'd probably be on your computer the whole time anyway." That sounded exactly like something my mother would say, like I was an appliance, not a person. "I only realized something was off when she posted that picture," he continued. "The family together one. You weren't in it. And when you liked it but didn't comment, she said you were being dramatic." I hadn't even remembered liking it. Must have done it on autopilot. He glanced toward my kitchen, where a small stack of medical bills still sat rubber-banded together. "And then," he said quietly, "they came back from the trip. You told them no when they showed up here. That morning they told me you had betrayed the family, that you'd turned your back on them." "That's one way to describe saying no," I said dryly. "They asked me to stay," he said. "Said they needed help until things stabilized. I'd been dating Emma for, 3 months? And suddenly I was sleeping on their couch, paying for groceries." He laughed, but it sounded nervous, thin. At first I thought, okay, it's temporary. I care about her. I can help for a bit. But then your mom cornered me in the kitchen one night and started talking long-term. My stomach tightened. "Long-term?" "Yeah," he said. "Marriage. Kids." She pulled out a photo album, actual pages of Emma as a baby, sat me down at the table, flipped through them like a salesperson walking me through model options. "Imagine what your kids will look like," she said. I winced. I could almost see it. Mom's soft voice weaponized. Emma hovering in the doorway, pretending to be embarrassed, but watching him too closely. "I told her I wasn't ready," Zach said, "that I didn't even know your extended family yet. And she said, 'Well, you're living with us. That makes you family.'" There it was again. That word they tossed around like a lasso to pull people in and tie them to obligations they never agreed to. I started feeling like I'd accidentally joined a cult, he admitted. Everything was about them, their emergencies, their plans, and any time I brought up boundaries, Emma cried, and your mom looked at me like I'd kicked a puppy. He finally looked up at me. "So I left. This morning. I broke up with Emma, packed a bag, and got out. I'm staying with a friend." Guilt, sharp and unexpected, pricked at me. I hadn't signed him up for this, but still. He'd been pulled into orbit around the same star that burned me. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "You didn't deserve that." He shook his head. "I'm telling you this because I get it now. I didn't understand why you told them no. Now I do." He stood, shoved his hands in his pockets. "I just didn't want you thinking I was part of replacing you. I didn't know, and I'm sorry for going on that trip." I believed him, which somehow made my family's choices feel even worse. After he left, the apartment felt different, like his confession had rearranged the furniture in my head. It confirmed what I already suspected. They weren't devastated that I'd cut them off. They were desperate to find another version of me, another resource, another lifeline. And when one bailed, they would look for the next. Sunday morning, my phone lit up with a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Later, curled up in bed with my laptop and a cup of tea I could barely lift, I hit play. "Hello, Mara, it's your father." His tone was icy. No preamble. No, "How are you feeling?" No acknowledgement that the last time he'd seen me, I'd been standing in a hospital nightgown body with the door half closed. "You've made your choice," he said. "We'll do things without you." Click, message over. I stared at my phone, then laughed, once, in disbelief. "We'll do things without you," as if that wasn't the point. I deleted the message. Thought that might be the end of it. It wasn't. On Monday, I decided to do something radically normal. Go to the store. I shuffled into jeans, pulled on a sweatshirt carefully over my still healing shoulder, grabbed my keys, and headed down to the parking lot. From a distance, my car looked fine, ordinary. Then I got closer. The words hit me before I even registered what I was looking at. Scrawled across my windshield, in thick, greasy streaks of what looked like oil or black paint. "Family doesn't leave family." All caps, letters uneven but furious. My keys slipped from my fingers. For a second, all I could hear was the soft hum of the highway in the distance and my own heartbeat banging in my ears. Someone had come here, found my car, stood in the open and written that while neighbors watched TV or cooked dinner. I looked around the lot. No one was staring. No one leaned out of their balcony. No cameras that I could see. Just sun bouncing off windshields and the faint smell of asphalt. I took a photo. 3, actually. Different angles. Then I called the non-emergency police line. An officer came, took a report, made all the right sympathetic noises. Said they'd check if any nearby businesses had cameras. I nodded. We both knew nothing would come of it. Vandalism is low priority, especially when the suspect pool is technically family. Back upstairs, I emailed the photos to myself and dropped them into a folder on my desktop. I named it something simple. Family. An hour later, my bank app pinged. Flagged activity. Unusual access attempt from a device in your hometown, it said. Please confirm whether this is you. It wasn't. I clicked no. Probably a coincidence, I thought. Maybe. But the timing was neat. The windshield, then the bank. Someone was angry that I'd pulled the plug. Someone wanted to scare me back into line and, failing that, get one more withdrawal on the way out. I sat on the edge of my bed, fingers steepled in front of my face, ribs aching as my breath turned shallow. There was a version of this story where I called them, where I yelled, where I demanded answers and apologies and explanations. I didn't choose that version, because this wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. This was escalation. They had drawn their message on my car, tried to crawl back into my accounts. And in doing so, they'd given me the clearest picture I'd ever had of who they really were when they weren't being fed. If they wanted a war, I wasn't going to fight it emotionally. I was going to fight it tactically. No more confronting, no more crying, no more begging them to see me. Instead, I opened my laptop. If they were willing to cross legal lines, then I needed to find the places where they'd already done it. I started with my credit report. And as the screen populated with old accounts and inquiries, my eyes landed on one line item I hadn't thought about in months. A 2022 loan, opened in my name, co-signer, my father. My vision narrowed. I remembered the confrontation, his dull denial, the way he'd folded when I mentioned a lawyer, his promise that he'd pay it off, that he'd take care of it. I had let it go. Now I saw it for what it really was. Not a one-time mistake, a roadmap. And this time, I was going to follow it, not to bail him out, but to pull the whole thing into the light. When I clicked open the old loan account, the page loaded slowly, as if even the website braced itself. There it was, a loan I never signed for, years old, still open, still accruing interest, and still tied to my social security number. Back in 2022, when I accidentally found it on a soft credit pull, I'd been stunned. I remembered the confrontation, how my dad blinked at me with false confusion, like a bad actor pretending not to understand his own lines. I don't know how that happened, he'd said. You must have forgotten. It's no big deal. Don't make this into drama. Then, when I mentioned it involving a lawyer, he switched masks instantly. Mara, please, I'll fix it. I'll pay it off. Don't escalate this. Families handle things privately. I'd been younger then, more trusting, more desperate to believe his version of events than my own instincts. I dropped it. Now, that old instinct to protect him was dead, buried under oil-smeared threats on my windshield. I took screenshots of every page, then opened a new email to the loan company's fraud department. I wrote, I did not authorize this account. My signature was forged. This was done without my knowledge or consent. Then I attached an affidavit template my lawyer friend sent me and signed it digitally. She owed me a favor, and she filled in the legal language for me. Within the hour, I got a response. We have opened a formal investigation. This account is frozen pending verification. Frozen, just like I had frozen the other accounts. Except this freeze was going to hit much harder. 3 days later, my phone buzzed. A photo from Mom, a letter from the bank. Then a voicemail. Mara, why would you do this? We're your family. Family forgives. You can't ruin your father's credit. It will destroy us. Please call me, please. Her voice cracked strategically, splitting the difference between anger and victimhood. I knew the tone well. The tone she used when she wanted something big. I listened once, deleted it. Emma posted a vague, dramatic Instagram story the same evening. Betrayal hurts most when it's from those you trust. White text, black background, aesthetic misery. If she'd replaced the word trust with fund, it might have been accurate. But the real shift happened when I drove out to see my grandfather. My dad's father lives 40 minutes north of the city in a small house that looks like it was carved out of stubbornness and old pine. A sagging porch, a wooden wind chime, a ceramic mug that always seems to be filled with black coffee no matter the hour. He opened the door before I knocked, gave me a long, assessing look. Took you long enough, he said. We sat on the porch, the wood groaning under our weight. I hadn't visited in over a year,
Not because I didn't want to, but because my father preferred to keep things simple, which really meant keep Mara away from anyone who might tell her the truth.
I told Grandpa everything. Not just the last few days. The everything, everything. The Aspen trip, the Facebook post, the knock on my door, the lies, the windshield, the attempted bank login, the loan fraud from 2022. He listened silently, leaning back in his chair, fingers drumming on the armrest in an arrhythmic pattern. His eyes, pale and sharp, hardly moved. When I finished, his mouth twitched. "You know," he said, "men like your father didn't last long in 45. Grandpa served, though he rarely talked about it, but he'd always been machine precise when it came to reading people. Big mouths, no discipline, no honor, the kind who'd sell you out to save his coat." I let the words sink in, because hearing someone else say them, someone who'd known my father his whole life, felt like having a puzzle piece dropped into place. Then he did something I didn't expect. He stood, shuffled inside, and came back with a file folder. Old, fraying at the edges. He handed it to me, without explanation. Inside, copies of documents, dates highlighted, signatures circled, proof that my father had falsified income on a veteran's grant application, proof that he had used fake employment records, proof that he had never closed the account he'd promised to take care of. Grandpa watched me flip through it, expression unreadable. "I kept those in case he ever tried something stupid with the VA again," he said. "Looks like he did." Then he leaned forward. "You let them come crawling, but don't let them forget the mud on their knees." A shiver ran through me. Not fear, but clarity. The kind you feel when you realize you have someone on your side who will not waver. "I can help," he added. "Push some buttons. Quietly." I swallowed. "Not yet." But I didn't say no. Later that week, Mom texted again. This time it wasn't tears or guilt or manipulation. It was an invitation. "Mom, we want to meet. Just talk. Clear the air. Just us. You, me, Dad." They didn't know I already had something else planned for that day. And they definitely didn't know I'd invited someone else. Someone who knew their tricks long before I ever did. The diner I chose was deliberate. Neutral ground. Quiet. Corner booth with visibility from all angles. Not too public, but public enough to keep things civil. I arrived early, slid into the booth, and ordered nothing but water. The condensation pooled under the glass in a perfect ring. At 6:03 p.m., they walked in. Mom first, purse clutched too tightly. Dad behind her, jaw set, eyes darting. Emma last, wearing sunglasses indoors. Dramatic, even for her. They slid into the booth like this was a family dinner, like I hadn't spent days documenting their sabotage. Mom started, "Mara, this has gotten out of hand. We're family. Family forgives. This whole thing is just misunderstandings. Bad timing." Dad didn't speak, which was unusual. He always liked to control the narrative. Today he looked like someone waiting for a verdict. They offered to let it all go if I stopped escalating, stopped investigating, stopped pushing, stopped being inconvenient. I let them talk. Then I leaned forward. "Do you remember the loan application where you claimed to be active military?" I asked my father. "The one where you doubled your income?" His entire face froze. Mom gasped. Emma's jaw fell open. I kept going. "I sent them the real numbers, and your actual DD-214. Mom opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Dad looked like someone had reached into his chest and squeezed. I stood to leave, and that's when a shadow fell across the table. My grandfather, arms crossed, expression like stone. Dad's face drained of color. He hadn't seen his father in months, not since Grandpa cut him off financially long before I ever did. Grandpa spoke without sitting down, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "You always thought you were smarter than everyone else," he said, "but being smart doesn't mean being honest." Then he turned to me. "I'm glad you didn't turn out like him." He walked out. No theatrics, no backward glance. I followed him. Behind us, my parents sat silent in that booth, as if the walls had shifted and they no longer knew their lines. And that was the exact moment I realized. I wasn't fighting them anymore. I was outgrowing them. I didn't hear from them the rest of the night after the diner. Not a text, not a call, not even one of Emma's cryptic story posts. I figured they needed time to regroup, rewrite the narrative in whatever way made them feel less exposed. I didn't expect the fallout to begin less than 48 hours later. The first crack, the frozen business. On Wednesday morning, I woke up to a short message from my grandfather. "Grandpa, check the filings." That was it. No hello, no punctuation. I knew exactly which filings he meant.
I pulled up the state business registry and typed in my father's LLC, the new property management company he'd been bragging about starting, the one he insisted would finally put him on the map.
A red banner covered the page.
Application suspended. Pending review. Discrepancies detected in zoning and income documentation.
They hadn't even made it to the permit stage. The city froze the entire application. I sat back and let the satisfaction wash over me. Not joy, not vengeance, but validation. They had played with lies for years. Now the lies were finally playing back. The second crack. Community whispers. The next blow came from the least threatening place imaginable, the local business council. My father had spent years trying to climb his way into that group, volunteering, networking, acting like he was the unofficial mayor of every charity event. He needed their approval, like oxygen. By noon, he'd lost his volunteer position. A community post had surfaced somewhere, anonymously forwarded, containing screenshots from my folder. The PA loan documents, the mismatched income statements, the veterans grant discrepancies. No commentary, just proof. Someone in the comments recognized his name.
From there, the council didn't need explanations. They distanced themselves immediately.
I didn't post the screenshots publicly under my name, but I didn't need to. This town circulates gossip the way other places circulate air. When I checked Facebook later, my mother's profile had vanished. No more inspirational memes or baked potato selfies. No long paragraphs about our sweet family. Gone.
Emma posted a crying selfie instead, black and white, captioned,
"People show their true colors in hard times." I didn't comment. Of course not.
Let her audience guess which colors she meant. She'd always been good at implying things without saying them.
The third crack. Emma's debt comes due. Zach texted me that evening. One line, nothing else. "Zach, want to help with something poetic?" I asked what he meant. He sent a picture of Emma's credit card statement, designer bags, concert tickets, a spa retreat the same week they told me they were barely surviving. All of it charged to a card in Zach's name. He was furious. Not at me, at them. He gave me permission to forward everything to her collection agency. So I did. I emailed them a comprehensive breakdown of her spending habits, her current place of employment, and her history of maxing out credit lines while avoiding payment. The agency responded within hours. Account frozen. Wage garnishment initiated. Emma called me 6 times that night. I didn't answer. Her last voicemail was a shaky, breathless whisper. "How could you do this to me?" I almost laughed out loud. The hypocrisy didn't even sting anymore. It just sounded like a script she'd memorized without understanding the lines. The final crack. The house. The next morning, Grandpa called. "I took care of it," he said.
"Care of what?" I asked.
"The house." I froze. Not many things scare me. This did, because Grandpa didn't joke. He explained plainly.
"This house has never belonged to your father. It was mine. I let him live there. That's over."
Dad had taken out a second mortgage on the house, without Grandpa's knowledge and using forged deeds claiming that he owned the property outright. When the bank reached out to confirm the documents, the call went straight to Grandpa. And instead of covering for his son, he handed them the actual deed. His voice when he told me this was steady, but underneath it was something colder. Enough is enough. He moved the entire property and the acreage around it into the newly updated family trust. The trust that now listed only me as the beneficiary. Not Emma, not Mom, not Dad. And because Dad had used false documents, the second mortgage was considered fraud. Within 4 days, they received a formal notice. Vacate property in 30 days. Mom texted me a picture of the notice with a caption. "Why are you doing this? We're family. Family forgives." I stared at it, then turned my phone face down on the table. Family forgives. Where was forgiveness when I was excluded from the vacation? When my spot was given to a 2-month boyfriend? When my windshield was vandalized? When they tried to break into my bank account? When they used my social security number? No, family doesn't forgive abuse. Family doesn't excuse manipulation. Family doesn't bury their own under debt. Families that care don't need forgiveness, because they don't treat you in ways that require it. The letter Grandpa burned. On the 29th day of their eviction period, my parents didn't call. They didn't show up. They didn't yell or beg. They left a letter in Grandpa's mailbox. I never saw it. He burned it in the fire pit behind his house. "Why?" I asked him. He shrugged. "Your father's spent 30 years writing apologies he didn't mean. I don't need to read another." I didn't press him. Some endings don't need details. Just flames. Seeing the truth. The full truth. After the eviction, Dad tried to start a consulting gig with an old friend. It faded almost immediately. Emma went back to retail.
Mom went offline, except for the occasional lurking alt account someone always spotted. People around town whispered, not because I told them anything, but because my dad's empire had always been built on smoke and charisma. Once the wind shifted, there was nothing left to hold it up. And then came the strangest twist of all. A woman emailed me, my father's former assistant from 2 jobs ago. She said, "I thought you should know. Your father has another child. A half-brother, from an affair while Mom was pregnant with Emma." Suddenly, everything made sense. Why Emma was the golden child, why I was always the outlier, why Dad treated me like a reminder of something he'd rather forget. I never told Emma. I doubt I ever will. Some truths are medicine, some are poison. The knife. Grandpa and I sat on his porch one evening as the sun dipped behind the line of pine trees. He brought out a box. Inside was an old hunting knife, worn handle, nicked blade. "This was your great-grandfather's," he said. "Used it to cut ropes when the barn caught fire in '42. Sometimes you gotta cut things loose before they pull you under." He placed it in my hands. "You did good, Mara. You didn't just get out. You finished it." I didn't respond. I just nodded, because he was right. And finishing it was the only way anything else could begin. The weeks after the eviction felt strangely quiet, like the world had hit a reset button I didn't ask for but desperately needed. My parents and Emma moved into a rental on the outskirts of town, an aging beige house with peeling paint and an overgrown yard. Someone else told me that, not them. My family, the same people who once filled my phone with demands and subtle guilt, now reached me only through secondhand whispers. And honestly, I preferred it that way. I visited Grandpa every Sunday. We'd sit on his porch, him with black coffee, me with tea, and listen to the wind sweep over the fields. Sometimes he talked. Sometimes neither of us did. Silence can be comforting when it isn't used as punishment. One Sunday, he brought out a wooden box. Inside was that old hunting knife he'd shown me earlier, the blade my great-grandfather used during a barn fire in 1942. He placed it gently on my lap. "You keep this," he said, "not because you'll need it, but because you already understand what it means." I traced the handle with my thumb. "Cutting ropes before they pull you under?" Grandpa smirked. "You're too smart for your own good sometimes." But yes, I didn't realize until that moment how much I'd needed someone older, wiser, blood-related, but not manipulative, to tell me I'd done the right thing. The monthly email. My father had always been predictable in one way. When backed into a corner, he'd try to maneuver back into control with a mixture of remorse and resentment, painted over with politeness. He didn't disappoint. A little over a month after the eviction, I got the first email. Not from his main address, one of the clean ones he used when he wanted to pretend he was starting fresh. The subject line was empty. The body read, "I hope one day you understand what you've done. Families go through things. But to do this, to us, I don't know how you sleep at night. Still, I miss you. Dad." I didn't respond. Not out of anger, but because there was nothing left to say. The man who ignored me for months, who used my credit without consent, who vandalized my car, who threatened legal action when I stopped financially supporting him, wanted me to understand what I'd done? No, he could live with his confusion. I had spent years living with mine. The land and the cabin. 2 months later, I received a surprising email from a real estate lawyer in another state. The subject line caught my attention. Urgent. Land use inquiry, overlapping zoning. At first, I thought it was spam. Then I read the message. My father, apparently, had purchased remote land outside of town through a shell LLC. A scraggly parcel of trees and dirt, so isolated it didn't even show up on basic maps. He'd quietly submitted blueprints for an off-grid cabin, solar panels, rainwater collection, a wood-burning stove. No address listed, no contact information beyond a burner email. If I didn't know better, I'd have thought he was trying to disappear. But I did know better. He wasn't disappearing. He was hiding, waiting us out, waiting for a crack, an opening, a chance to come back when the smoke cleared. The lawyer only found my name because of an overlap in family-deeded land. Grandpa's old property, the land my father had conveniently forgotten, wasn't his. Part of me wondered whether I should tell Grandpa. I didn't have to. One evening, Grandpa called me over. He opened the door with a small knowing nod. "Your father has been snooping around the assessor's office," he said, asking about boundary shifts, building permits, whispering to whoever would listen, trying to redraw things quietly. I froze. "So you know." "I knew before he did," Grandpa said, "and I knew exactly why." He walked to a drawer, pulled out a sealed envelope, and handed it to me. Inside was a deed. Not to our land.
to the parcel right next to the one my father bought. Grandpa had bought it a week earlier, through a different LLC, under a different name. If my father thought he could slither into the mountains like a ghost and rebuild his little world from the shadows, he'd now have to look directly at Grandpa's property line every time he stepped outside. Grandpa's grin was wicked. If he wants to disappear into the woods, he said, let him do it where I can keep an eye on his foolishness. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Maybe both. The half-brother. The next twist came from a woman I had never met, a former assistant from my father's car dealership days. She emailed saying she'd seen what happened with the eviction and the family trust and thought I needed to know something. My father had another child, a boy, born while my mother was pregnant with Emma, a half-brother I had never known existed. I stared at the message for a long time. My stomach felt hollow. Suddenly, the uneven way my father treated me and Emma made sense. Why Emma was the golden child. Why I was barely tolerated unless I was useful. Why there was always something cold in his eyes when he looked at me, like I reminded him of a mistake he never paid for. It didn't excuse anything, but it explained everything. I didn't tell Emma. I don't know if I ever will. Some truths don't set you free. Some just break you. The ending I chose. I didn't seek revenge. I didn't go back to the house to watch them move out. I didn't confront them about the land, the fraud, the windshield, or the lies. I cut the ropes. All of them. Not to punish them, but to save myself. One afternoon, sitting on Grandpa's porch, he handed me the hunting knife again. You're done, he said. It wasn't a question. It was a blessing, a benediction, a release. He looked out at the property line, our land now, not my father's, and gave a small nod. You did what needed doing, Mara. Not for spite, for survival. I sipped my tea, breathing in the cold air. In the distance, pine branches swayed. The horizon looked wider than it had in years. My father still sends the occasional email, part bitterness, part apology, part manipulation. I don't open them anymore. Emma has blocked me on everything. Mom pretends none of it happened, rewriting our history as tragedy instead of consequence. Let them. I'm done playing archivist to their delusions. The truth doesn't need to be believed to be true. As for me, I live quietly. I work. I sleep without dread. I wake without guilt. Sometimes silence feels better than reconciliation ever could. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't cruelty. It wasn't pettiness. It was choosing my own life. And for the first time, I am finally free.